In the final, chaotic days of 1989, as the cold of winter swept across Eastern Europe, an old dictator faced his end. He would be executed on Christmas Day. A man with a mere 4 years of education who had once held the power of life and death over an entire nation. His name was whispered in every office, his portrait hung in every school. To the world, he was the enigmatic maverick of the communist bloc. Now, he was just a man in an overcoat, standing against a blood-stained wall in a forgotten military base in the city of Târgoviște. Beside him, his wife, his partner in power, his equal in ambition. The man who once spoke to cheering multitudes was now a prisoner, his pleas ignored, his authority vanished. The charges were read in a rushed, chaotic trial. Genocide, corruption, the ruin of a nation. The sentence was a foregone conclusion. Death. As the soldiers raised their rifles, he began to sing the Internationale. The anthem of his ideology would be his final words. His life, from obscurity to absolute power, was ending here, against a wall. This is the story of Nicolae Ceausescu, and the nation he molded broke and continues to haunt. A boy from a forgotten village. The story begins not in a palace, but in a place of hardship. He was born in 1918 in Scornicești, a small, poor village where life was a simple, brutal rhythm of work and want. Unlike the official propaganda that would later paint him as a boy genius, the young Nicolae was an unremarkable student. He completed 4 years of primary school, showing decent but not brilliant grades. But in a world defined by poverty, education was a luxury. His family needed one less mouth to feed more than they needed a scholar. And so, at the age of just 11, he was sent away. Following his older siblings, he made his way to the capital, Bucharest. He was so poor, he had to borrow the money for the journey. For a boy from the quiet fields of his village, Bucharest in the 1930s was another world. It was a city of glittering lights, of grand boulevards and royal palaces, of intellectuals debating in smoky cafes. But this was not the world Nicolae would know. His Bucharest was one of back alleys and squalid workshops. He became a shoemaker's apprentice. He slept in a cramped, dirty room with other boys, working long hours for little pay. From his workshop, he could almost see the centers of power and wealth, a world he was utterly excluded from. It was in this environment of poverty and marginalization that he first heard of a new idea. An idea that promised justice for the poor, that promised to tear down the old world and build a new one. That idea was communism. For a lonely, impoverished boy on the fringes of society, communism was a powerful lure. It gave him a purpose, it gave him a group to belong to, and it gave him an enemy to blame for his suffering. He joined the Union of Communist Youth, an illegal organization, and his life changed forever. The shy boy from the village was gone, replaced by a zealous revolutionary. His new life was a blur of secret meetings, distributing propaganda, and organizing strikes. It was also a life of arrests, interrogations, and violence. His first arrest came in 1933. He was just a teenager. This would become the pattern of his youth. Short periods of freedom were followed by brutal encounters with the state security forces and prison sentences. The prisons of interwar Romania became his university. It was there, among other hardened communists, that he learned the true meaning of ideology and loyalty. And it was in prison, at the infamous Doftana facility, that he met the men who would one day rule Romania. Most importantly, he came into the orbit of Dej, the undisputed leader of the imprisoned communists. Ceausescu was not a great thinker or orator, but he was disciplined, fanatically loyal, and willing to do whatever the party asked. He made himself useful to Dej, becoming his devoted subordinate. It was also in this period that he met a young woman, a fellow communist activist named Elena Petrescu. She was as ambitious and ideologically committed as he was. They fell deeply in love, a bond that would last their entire lives, forming a political partnership that would one day bring a nation to its knees. The Young Wolf. When the Second World War ended and the Soviet shadow fell over Romania, everything changed. The once illegal Communist Party, backed by Soviet tanks, began its methodical takeover of the country. For Ceausescu, this was the moment he had been waiting for. He was no longer a hunted activist. He was an instrument of power. His old mentor Dej became the leader of the new communist Romania, and Ceausescu was his loyal attack dog. He was energetic, ruthless, and utterly dedicated. He was given a series of crucial jobs, organizing the youth, crushing political opposition, and overseeing the brutal policy of collectivization. This policy aimed to destroy the traditional village life by forcing peasants to give up their land and join collective farms. It was met with fierce resistance. In 1957, in a small village, peasants rose up in protest. Ceausescu, now a general in the army despite having no formal military training, was sent to handle the situation personally. The crackdown was swift and merciless. Troops opened fire on the unarmed villagers. Men were killed in the fields, leaving behind orphans and grieving widows. Ceausescu oversaw the operation without flinching. It was a chilling preview of the man he would become. Throughout the 1950s and early 60s, he meticulously built his power base. Dej rewarded his loyalty by putting him in charge of the party's organization and cadres department. This was the heart of the machine. Ceausescu now controlled who got promoted, who got demoted, and who was purged. He had access to the secret files on every party member, knowing their weaknesses and their sins. He quietly placed his own loyalists in key positions across the country, creating a network that owed its existence to him alone. He was the perfect number two. He never challenged Dej, always attacking his rivals for him. But Dej, a paranoid leader himself, began to grow wary of his subordinates' rising power and ambition. By early 1965, it was rumored that Dej was planning to remove him, but fate, or perhaps luck, intervened. In March 1965, Dej suddenly died of cancer. The throne was empty. In the hours that followed, Ceausescu moved with breathtaking speed. Using the network he had built and making promises to other key leaders, he outmaneuvered his rivals. Before anyone truly knew what was happening, Nicolae Ceausescu, the poor boy from a small village, was named the new leader of the Romanian Communist Party. He had reached the summit. The illusion of a golden age. To the surprise of many, Ceausescu's rise to power was seen as a sign of hope. He was young, he was Romanian, unlike many of the old guard with ties to Moscow, and he seemed like a reformer. The first few years of his rule appeared to confirm this. This was the so-called Golden Age. There was a palpable sense of opening up. The economy grew. A deal was struck with Renault to produce the Dacia car. New hotels and highways were built. The borders, once sealed shut, began to open slightly, allowing a trickle of tourism and cultural exchange with the West. Ceausescu presented himself as a modest leader. He discouraged the portraits and slogans that had defined his predecessor's era. In foreign policy, he became a star. He defied the Soviet Union, establishing diplomatic relations with West Germany and refusing to condemn Israel during the Six-Day War. He seemed to be carving out a unique, independent path within the communist bloc. His moment of greatest triumph came in August 1968. When Soviet tanks rolled into Czechoslovakia to crush the Prague Spring reforms, Ceausescu did the unthinkable. He held a massive rally in Bucharest and publicly condemned the invasion. From the balcony of the Central Committee building, he declared that the invasion was a grave mistake, and that the Romanian people would never allow their homeland to be violated. The crowd roared its approval. The world watched in awe. In the West, he was hailed as a courageous hero, a maverick standing up to the Soviet bear. He was decorated by the President of France and later welcomed to the White House by Richard Nixon. It seemed like a new dawn for Romania. But it was all an illusion. Behind the curtain of reform, Ceausescu was building one of the most oppressive and personalized dictatorships in the world. The 1968 speech wasn't about freedom for the Czechs. It was a declaration that he, and only he, would be the master of Romania. He used the wave of national pride to consolidate his power absolutely. He purged the old guard one by one, replacing them with his own yes men. And the darkest signs were already there. In 1966, fearing a demographic decline, he issued Decree 770, which outlawed abortion and contraception. The state now controlled the most intimate aspects of a woman's life. The policy led to a temporary baby boom, a generation that would ironically come of age just in time to overthrow him, but it also led to the deaths of thousands of women in desperate, unsafe back-alley abortions. While the world was praising him, Ceausescu was already showing his profound disregard for human life and freedom. The golden age was a mirage, and a long, dark night was about to fall. The God-King of a starving nation. In 1971, Ceausescu took a fateful tour of Asia. What he saw in the disciplined mass rallies of China and, especially, the total social control of North Korea's Kim Il-sung deeply impressed him. He returned to Romania, convinced that he too could create a society of perfect order with himself at the center. This marked the beginning of the end. He launched a mini-cultural revolution, tightening ideological control over every aspect of life. The brief opening to the West was over. History was rewritten to place him at the end of a long line of heroic Romanian rulers. A breathtaking cult of personality bloomed. He was the genius of the Carpathians, the first son of the people. His wife, Elena, a woman with a fourth-grade education, was declared a world-renowned scientist. Their portraits were everywhere. Every public event became a stage for their praise. His megalomania took physical form. He decided to reshape the very face of Romania. He demolished historic neighborhoods in Bucharest, including churches and monasteries, to build a gargantuan new civic center. The centerpiece was the House of the Republic, now the Palace of Parliament, a building so immense it remains one of the largest in the world. It was a monument to his ego, built with the forced labor of soldiers and volunteers. To fund these grandiose dreams and the massive, inefficient industrialization program, he had borrowed heavily from the West. Then, in the early 1980s, in a fit of pride and paranoia, he made a catastrophic decision. Romania would pay back its entire foreign debt, and it would do so immediately. The consequences were devastating. To export everything possible, he starved his own people. Food was strictly rationed. Bread, sugar, and oil were available only with ration cards. Meat, butter, and fruit became rare luxuries. The suffering went beyond hunger. To save energy, electricity, and heating were cut for hours every day. In the bitter Romanian winters, people shivered in their apartments, bundled in layers of clothing. Hot water was available for maybe an hour a day. Driving was restricted. The epoch of gold, as the propaganda called it, was an era of cold, darkness, and endless queues for basic necessities. Yet Ceausescu and Elena lived in unparalleled luxury, completely insulated from the suffering they inflicted. They were convinced of their own genius, surrounded by sycophants who told them only what they wanted to hear. When his own son, Nicu, once dared to tell him that people were freezing in their homes, Elena snapped back, "You haven't traveled the whole country to see how it is." They simply refused to believe in a reality that contradicted their vision. The last days of the dictator couple. By the end of the 1980s, Romania was a pressure cooker. The people were exhausted, humiliated, and stripped of hope. All around them, the communist bloc was crumbling. The Berlin Wall had fallen. Poland, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia were embracing freedom. But in Romania, Ceausescu, now old and frail, clung to power, completely isolated from the world and from his own people. The spark ignited in the western city of Timișoara in mid-December 1989. A small protest in support of a dissident pastor grew into a mass demonstration against the regime. Ceausescu, furious, ordered his security forces, the dreaded Securitate, to open fire. Dozens were killed. He believed he had crushed the revolt. He gave a televised speech blaming foreign agents and hooligans. Then, in a stunning display of hubris, his wife suggested they organize a massive, spontaneous rally in Bucharest to show the world the people still loved him. On December 21, 1989, a massive crowd was assembled in the palace square. As Ceausescu began to speak his usual empty slogans from the Central Committee balcony, something unprecedented happened. A single boo was heard, then another. Then a ripple of noise turned into a roar of defiance. For the first time, the dictator saw not adoration, but pure hatred in the eyes of his people. His face, broadcast live on television, froze in a mask of confusion and fear. Ceausescu realized he was trapped. He and Elena fled to the roof and escaped in a helicopter just moments before the mob broke into the building. The revolution had begun. That night, the streets of Bucharest became a war zone. Their freedom was short-lived. The army had defected to the side of the revolution. After a desperate and chaotic journey, abandoned by their pilots and bodyguards, the most feared couple in Romania were captured by a local police patrol on a country road. Their end was swift. On Christmas Day, 1989, Nicolae and Elena Ceausescu were put on trial before a secret military tribunal. The trial was a sham, a piece of political theatre designed to legitimize a predetermined outcome. In just under an hour, they were found guilty and sentenced to death. They were led out into a courtyard. Against a dirty wall, a lifetime of absolute power ended in a hail of gunfire.
Frate, nu mai trage nimeni.
The death of the dictator was broadcast to a euphoric nation. But the story did not end there. In the years that followed, Romania struggled to emerge from his long shadow. The country is now a democracy, a member of the European Union and NATO. The scars, however, remain. And a strange thing has happened. A certain nostalgia has taken root. Today, fresh flowers can always be found on Ceausescu's grave. Polls have shown a surprising number of Romanians who believe he was a good leader, who remember the era not for its tyranny, but for a perceived sense of order and national independence. They point to the apartment blocks, the subway, the factories he built, forgetting the price that was paid.